Um, You'll see obviously on your screen we've got a packed panel today, which is brilliant. So we've got Dougie Spence first. Dougie is funding manager at the National Lottery Community Fund. He's going to be talking us through what's available through the Community Fund at the moment. Then we're delighted that we're also joined by Chris Holloway. He's going to be talking about Resilient Scotland and giving us a perspective from Resilient Scotland around funding and finance at the moment. And then we felt it was really important that we also heard from social enterprises on the ground about how they're approaching funding and finance at the moment. So delighted today to be joined by Zakia, who's founder of Invisible Cities. Oh, and I'm just noting, Jonny, that your name's showing up as Dougie Spence. But for those of you who have noticed that we had two Dougie Spences, that's just how we've clicked on the panelist links.
That's slightly worrying.
Oh, I don't know who for the most, actually, Dougie. What do you think?
Go for Jonny.
So Jonny, I think, will come back in on his own link in a minute, so he's got his own name. There we go. Welcome, Jonny. And last but not least, joining us today, Jonny Kinross from Grassmarket Community Project. So without further ado, because we've got a lot to get through and I know there's lots of questions, I'm going to ask Dougie to start us off. I'll also be doing a little bit just as part of the Q&As, trying to give a bit of an update on where we think we're at with things like the recovery funds. So obviously we know it's been announced in the Scottish Government Recovery Programme, and we know lots of people are waiting to hear on that as well. So we'll come to that in the Q&A as well. So without further ado, Dougie, over to you. And would you like me to put your slides up straight away?
Yes, please. Thanks, Naomi.
Brilliant.
Good morning, everyone. Naomi, thanks for having me. I'm conscious that we've got a packed hour ahead of us, and I don't want to overrun. So Naomi is going to help me with some slides. So if we start rattling through the slides at a great rate of knots, it's Naomi's key to me that I'm going too slowly and I'm taking up other people's time. So as I say, I'm a funding manager with the National Lottery Community Fund, and I have principal responsibilities for the Highlands and Islands area team. And what I'm going to do today is just set a bit of a scene as far as what the current funding opportunities are with ourselves. But as I say, as we move on to the next slide, I thought it might be helpful to set the scene about how we work. And we, for the last couple of years, have been working in area teams. And effectively, wherever your enterprise group is based, the area team within the community fund would pick up that inquiry and speak with you direct. We're all still obviously working from home, so the contact details that you can see on the right-hand side are probably the best way in terms of making contact with the community fund, and it's then allocated out on an almost hourly basis to the relevant teams who will then get in touch with you. Moving on, one of the important things that I would like to stress is we don't bite. With the exception of Awards for All, application forms are not available online, and we want to hear from folk. Current times, all very challenging, challenging for ourselves, particularly challenging for everyone else. No question, no idea is too daft, and we absolutely do want to speak to people in advance, and that's part of the reason for making sure that, or making the application forms not available online, because we want to have a discussion with folk in advance, so that they're not working up ideas or application forms which possibly don't stand a chance. Moving on, we can fund all sorts of work, and I think that's important for social enterprises to be aware of. We're not necessarily limited in scope, depends on the programs. There are limitations as far as that's concerned, but we've got an overarching aim or mission to reduce disadvantage and inequality. Moving on. Who can we fund? Charities, SKIOs, KICs, companies limited by guarantee, constituted groups. We can't, unfortunately, fund sole traders, nor can we fund companies that are limited, private limited companies funded by with shares. So with the exception of those notable exceptions, there's a wide range of organisations that we can fund. But what can I really like you to take away from today's session is that for us, what we're really interested in is what it is that you're going to be doing, rather than your structure or constitution, etc. We'll work with you or speak to you a bit about that, but we want to hear what it is that you're going to be doing. Moving on. Again, I thought we'd just throw this in just at the start to give you a sort of flavour of the sort of things that we can fund. Salaries, staffing costs, overheads, the list is there. It's a pretty wide range of costs that can be brought into that. So there's a limited amount of costs that we can't really cover. Costs for sole traders, as you'd expect, we were not able to fund. Promotion of religion or political views, again, is not something we'd fund. But again, these are the sort of discussions you would have with one of the funding teams at the start, and you'd be able to sort of tailor your project or your application accordingly if that's the way that we're going to go forward. Moving on. Again, we have these things called our 3 approaches, and we really look for projects across all the programmes to come through very strongly on being people-led, strength-based and connected. What do we mean by people-led? Well, that's meaningfully involving the people you're going to be working with in the design, the development, the delivery of the activities. Strength-based, what you're going to be doing, well, you're going to be making the most of skills or assets and experiences of people to help deliver the project. And connected effectively means that you've got a good understanding of what others are doing locally, and you've got good working relationships. You're complementing what else is going on, adding value. And I think one of the things that shines through is that social enterprises are in many respects already well on the way to meeting the 3 approaches. It's a question of having a chat with the funding officers and letting them know how you feel you meet those approaches. But many social enterprises, as I say, are already geared up and are strong on the 3 approaches. Can we move on? In terms of funding opportunities, we've got a number of programmes that are open at the moment. You'll all have heard of National Lottery Awards for All, I'm sure. It's a fairly straightforward application form. It's available online, has a broad application, broad application in terms of how it may be used. But all the sorts of organisations that I mentioned earlier can apply to Awards for All. It's relatively small amounts of money, £300 to £10,000. It's important that we obtaining funding. When you go above £10,000, our grants fall largely into 2 categories. You've got the thematic category and then the local community category. And we move on. And thematically, that would be broken down currently into children, young people, families, in challenging circumstances, isolation, loss, loneliness, surviving abuse, and challenging discrimination. And Young Start would cover the wider work, which is led by young people. Moving on. And community, you're looking at neighbourhood level wellbeing activities and community ownership of buildings and assets. That's quite a tricky one at the moment. Effectively, community assets closed in March of this year, but we can still provide a certain amount of capital through community-led medium. Moving on. And this can be summarised into 2 broad categories here. So you've got improving lives and Young Start on the thematic side, and you've got community activity on the community side. You'll see I put a line through community assets and Scottish Land Fund. As I say, community assets closed in March of this year and final awards were made. And Land Fund is going through the final series of awards at this time. If you've been aware from looking at the website previously, you'll have heard of the terms Improving Lives Medium and Improving Lives Large. As with all funders, we are currently adjusting to the challenges presented by COVID. And whilst Improving Lives is not closing, what we're effectively doing is we're consolidating medium enlarge into which would allow funding up to £200,000 towards relevant projects. And that is a change that is going live on the website, I think either today or tomorrow. And that's going to create a certain demand in terms of there's a short lead-in time to the closure of Improving Lives Large, which would currently allow up to £500,000, but effectively from the beginning of October, Improving Lives and community-led will have a single threshold of £200,000. And the reason we've gone for that is that Improving Lives Large is a very slow process. It can take 6 to 8 months to get through that, and frankly that's not good enough. And we think that the challenges that are being faced at the moment would require folk to be looking at perhaps smaller pockets of money for a set amount of time, and we're hoping that the £200,000 will be an appropriate limit for that. One of the challenges that I think we're facing is that whether thematically within Improving Lives we're covering the right sort of activities. That is something that is being looked at just now. Again, as with all funders, we're refreshing what we look at. Prior to COVID hitting these shores, we had been planning to close all our programmes, with the exception of Awards for All, on the basis that every 5 years or so we do update our programmes to adjust to what the current climate is. It's quite difficult to adjust to a climate where the climate is challenging, it's varying, it's changing all the time. So what we've elected to do is, rather than close Improving Lives and community-led at the current time, we would stick with them for the next 18 to 24 months. And the hope is that in that time, we'll have a bit more certainty, we'll have a bit more understanding of what the future is going to look like, and the new programmes will kick in after that. We are looking to transition and perhaps tweak the activities that we're team working on that at the moment. Again, we speak with stakeholders, Scottish Government, other funders as to what everyone else is going to be doing, and we're wanting to make sure that we've got relevant and fair coverage as far as we possibly can. So those activities are likely to be tweaked over the next 4, 6, 8 weeks, and effectively I'm anticipating that they will be changed by the start of November, but that's an ongoing process. But as I say, our overall mission remains to address disadvantage inequality, and that's not going to be moved away from in the course of this transitional review that we're doing at the moment. Moving on. There are various ways to keep in touch with us and be up to date on how things are going. We've got a blog page which you can review. The address is there. And moving on. We've got an e-bulletin which you can sign up to, and that will come out to you on a monthly basis. And on. And a general note there with some further contact details about keeping in touch. I'm kind of hoping that I've kept the 10 minutes. I haven't put a clock on myself. I'm happy to take any questions later on or deal with any inquiries if folk want to come to me direct afterwards, but I hope that helps.
Thank you, Dougie. I think you were pretty much on time, which is brilliant. So 10 out of 10 for that one. And thank you. That was a comprehensive overview. And I know there's a few questions coming in that I'm hopeful, some of which I know were answered through the presentation, but I'll just reference them when we come to the Q&A at the end, just in case anyone missed them. But without holding back the session and getting to the questions, I was going to bring Chris in now. So Chris is with Resilience Scotland, and he's going to talk us through Resilience Scotland's programmes. So over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Naomi. Morning, everyone. Hope everyone's keeping safe and well. Talking about Resilience Scotland today is kind of strange because our programme and our fund is actually closed at the moment, but that is because Resilience Scotland is a loan and grant fund. We have a portfolio of over £11 million, with a significant amount of that being in loan funds. Now, I'm sure many of you in the Zoom room will have experience of loans. Certainly Jonny on the panel is a recipient of a Resilience Scotland loan and grant, and therefore we are spending our resources and targeting our time on those that actually have our money at the moment. We're trying to take the pressure off loan payments. We're trying to give people as much help and advice as possible. However, that will not always be the case. We plan to reopen the fund early in 2021, when we hope market conditions will have settled down ever so slightly. So we hope to relaunch the funds. And just to give you a look back to the past, what it was, with a fund called Start and Grow, which was a grant loan mix of 2/3 loan and 1/3 grant, up to £60,000, be payable over 5 years. And we also have Making Enterprise Happen, which is amounts up to £500,000, and that would be half grant and half loan, project dependent. Our money is very flexible. It can be taken over 10 years. And unlike National Lottery, we don't have many stipulations on what you spend the money on. We really want you to spend the money on what you think will bring you the best business, but also enable you to achieve the best business outcomes. But another further change that will be happening next year is that Resilient Scotland will be merging with Foundation Scotland. Foundation Scotland, for any of you that don't know, work with philanthropists and trusts and foundations across Scotland to bring philanthropic spending to organisations and community groups across Scotland. So Resilient Scotland has been spending a lot of time with Foundation Scotland as part of the integration and helping them with their work throughout the pandemic. So I thought, rather than spend time talking about the past and Resilient Scotland and what could have been, it would be sensible to talk about the future and what's currently available from Foundation Scotland. Foundation Scotland have been working with the National Emergencies Trust, and that's grants up to £5,000. The first set of grants we gave out totaled over £2 million, and that was to enable people to deal with emergencies related to the pandemic. And the funds were aimed to be complementary of the government funds that were out at the time, including that the Resilience Fund and the Wellbeing Fund and the Food Programme. This set of funds that are live at the moment is to help organisations with recovery, to help organisations get back to what they were doing in a different way, because we all know returning to normal has been very difficult and might not actually be possible. But we all want to help organisations adapt for the future. So that might be money for PPE, it might be money to help you move online, it might be money for protective screens. There's a whole lot of different things that are possible under the recovery fund, and that money is available to organisations with an income of less than £250,000. That ceiling is there because the fund has been so popular. Another fund that we're running at the moment is on behalf of the Crown Estates, and that's grants of between £10,000 and £50,000 for organisations that are trying to be enterprising in their local communities. Now, obviously, with the Crown Estates, there are going to be geographical restrictions, and that restriction is you must be within 5 miles of the Scottish Crown Estate. Now, as part of that, there are 4 rural estates, and obviously 50% of Scotland is surrounded by coastline, all owned by the Crown Estate. So that may well be worth checking out for some of the rural social enterprises within the room. There's some other smaller programmes that are consistently running at Foundation Scotland. Grants up to £2,000 from the Essentia Foundation, from Union Square in Aberdeen. Obviously that's only for AB postcodes. For Silverburn in Glasgow, there's grants available from that group for up to £2,000 from the communities that surround the Silverburn shopping centre. And we also have a fund that stays with us regularly from Baillie Gifford, grants of up to £2,000. So there's quite a mix and match in there from new funds that will be released from Resilient Scotland going forward from 2021. There's the Triple R fund that is ongoing, and a whole stream of funds that's available for Foundation Scotland. So I'm sorry to say that we don't have funds available for new investees at the moment. but certainly our group of investees, we're working with government to be part of the recovery fund, and we hope to announce plans for that in the near future to help anyone that's part of our portfolio at the moment. So I promised Zakia that she could have some of my time, so I think I've only possibly taken up 5 minutes, so I can gift that to her in the next section. Thanks very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Chris. Again, another useful overview, and I certainly know I was involved in my local community putting into the small, was it the 3R, the Resilience Recovery Programme? So yeah, it's been a really useful and fast turnaround. I think what's been tough is, you know, we've all been going through transition, but I think a lot of the feedback we've had from our members has actually been around how funders have adapted quickly and tried to adapt their processes and really tried to work with organisations, and that's certainly been much appreciated. So we know it's been hard on groups out there. We know it still continues to be a challenge, and I guess that's why we wanted to make sure that when we're looking at funding, we thought it was helpful for our members to hear from other organisations on the ground in terms of how they've approached kind of sudden drops in income, which I know has been a challenge for invisible cities in terms of looking at tourism. And so I'm going to hand straight over to Zakia, who's going to give us a bit of a perspective on funding and finance from her perspective. So over to you, Zakia.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone can hear me okay. It's happened when I've rambled on and then I realised I was on mute, so now I always double check. I thought that what I would do is give you an overview of our experience at Invisible Cities in terms of funding during this period, and then some of the lessons, I guess, or some of the things that I find are really important to keep in mind all the time. And then I'm happy to, you know, later on, as everyone else, to take questions. So if you don't know, Invisible Cities, we train people who have experienced homelessness to become walking tour guides of their own city. And then we offer alternative walking tours to tourists and locals alike in 4 different locations. So Edinburgh and Glasgow in Scotland, and then Manchester and York in England. And our tours are alternative, off the beaten track, but also raise awareness about issues that we feel are important in our cities. And so obviously this year has been an enormous challenge for us, but I guess the one thing that's important to say is that because we work with big international groups, so that may be event organisers or tour operators or schools who come and take on trips to Scotland or England on a yearly basis, we could see something happen maybe a little bit more in advance than some others. So in January, even in January, February, I had loads of groups and loads of things getting cancelled, and there were weeks where we would lose £30,000 worth of income that'd been confirmed for the rest of our year and even into 2021, 2022. Because that's how operators work out. They book everything well in advance, up to a year and a half beforehand. So things were crumbling down, and then obviously we came to be into lockdown. So we lost 100% of our income because every tour obviously got cancelled. But now operators and everybody we would work with are being cautious, and so they're not. They cancelled what they had in line, but are also pacing themselves into and being careful with booking again for the future. So as a social enterprise, what's really important, and the most important thing for us, is our guides and the people that we work with. So we have people who are guides and people who are trainees and people who are supported volunteers, so I'll always refer to them like that. So our priority was to make sure that they were safe, that they were housed, and that they could look after themselves and they could feed themselves. And so there was a bit of an emergency and kind of this sense of, okay, we need to make this happen in March and check on everyone. So sometimes that meant working with other organisations like our good friends at the Grassmarket Community Project or Glasgow Council, to make sure that everybody had the best environment in those difficult circumstances. But we don't deliver emergency support as an organisation. What we do is all about training and empowerment and raising awareness. So we felt that, you know, some of the funding that was out there or some of the activities that were out there were not really relevant to us, because apart from supporting our direct beneficiaries, our guides and trainees and volunteers, we didn't do anything else, and all activities were stopped when it came to having public contact. But one of the first things we did was set up a crowdfunder, and that was to be able to raise funds to provide weekly food deliveries to our guides, trainees and volunteers. So that's 18 households in between Edinburgh and Scotland, Edinburgh and Glasgow, sorry. And my experience with crowdfunder pages, whatever platform you use, was always a bit mixed. We never really raised a lot of funds before. And I think that's because, again, what we do is very much projected into the future. And what we asked money for in the past was maybe to support more guides or maybe organize more trainings, but it wasn't a very physical thing or tangible support. Whereas this time round, asking for donations from the public to be able to buy those shopping bags, you know, to buy food to then deliver to our people, to our team, worked out a lot better. So a lot of our customers, a lot of our supporters, a lot of our friends came in, and we were able to raise £5,000 through this. And then one really, really important thing is to talk. And this is something that I spent a lot of time doing in March. Particular is talking to all of our partners and supporters and funders about where we were at, what was happening, and what support we needed. And so, for example, Crisis, the homelessness charity that we work with when it comes to training, also had a fund to support emergency response. So I approached them and said, you know, I'm not sure whether or not it'll qualify, but we want to provide weekly food deliveries. Do you think we could apply for this fund? And they really supported us in topping up that crowdfunder and actually writing this application together and making it a reality. And then similarly with the Grassmarket community project, you know, and I'm sure Jonny will speak about this, we were able to work together and provide tablets and devices for our guides and trainees again. So after the food emergency kind of quietened down, then to have more of a connection emergency and for people to on top of things and mentally be engaging with us. So talking to our partners made me realise, or made us find avenues that we hadn't thought of. And you know, what we heard a little bit earlier around funders who don't bite, I think I can really, really relate to. And I think that's a really important take from me, is that being able to do that work and talk to everybody, as difficult as it was, and say to Crisis, but also, you know, we were part of a Big Issue Invest program before, so speak to them on a regularly basis and say, right, okay, we've got no income whatsoever, what can we do, and trying to find solutions. So very early on I spoke to Big Issue Invest about a potential loan, another one, like a brand new one, but actually then that's when the Third Sector Resilience Fund came in. So together, you know, we then realised we'll apply for this and then see what the outcomes are. So we did get a grant really early on again, from the Resilience Fund, and that gave us the peace of mind to know that our team could be looked after during this period, because we couldn't furlough many people. We furloughed 1.5 person, but actually we still needed to look after our guides and trainees, and we still needed to be doing work with them. So and we needed to make sure that those positions were filled and that people were not afraid that their jobs might be at risk. So talking to funders is a big take that for me I think is really important. But the most important thing, and I always bang on about it, is collaboration and talking to each other as social enterprises. I think, you know, I have spent again a big amount of time talking to other enterprises, other charities, to see what they were doing and telling them what we were doing. So then sometimes that gives you leads and that gives you opportunities to find things that you wouldn't have found otherwise. And actually we applied for an award for all right before the lockdown with the lottery. So I was like, oh, for something specific in Scotland, which is to train women around tours and storytellings that are relevant to women. And I really thought, okay, well, given the circumstances, none of that is going to happen. But actually, with our manager, we were able to have those conversations on Zoom again in April or May, and we were granted an award for that. So through this, we've actually been able to recruit a new member of the team, which is an amazing thing to do during this period, because it gives you hope in humanity again, and it's really nice, and it kind of injects a new boost of energy with everybody. But what else did I have to say? Yeah, so our crowdfunder was really successful, but I think that's because we were asking for something that people could relate to, and people who'd come on tours just wanted to support their guides further. We really felt the community, we really felt that our guests and our supporters came together to see how we were doing. A lot of people who'd come on tours sent us messages and say, what can I do to help? So when it wasn't, well, a donation for our crowdfunder, for us it might have been, now is the time to leave us a review on TripAdvisor, or now is the time to spread the word about what we do. So it really came together as a community of supporters. But we found that through this energy of people wanting to support you, we were also able to diversify a little bit what we were doing. And that's a word that I've heard a lot during over the last few months: diversify your activities, generate income in other ways. But for a tour operator, for a tour company like ourselves, what we do, the core of what we do is create a face-to-face experience. And so going online, going virtual, creating, content is completely different to who we are. So we had a bit of a challenge trying to find out solutions and product stuck at home. And again, we worked a lot with our partners, and one of the big companies that we worked closely with is Airbnb, and they went massive on online experiences, being able to offer that to guests. But through conversations, and I'm talking like maybe 4 or 5 Zoom calls with them, we explored different avenues and realized it's maybe taken us away from who we are. And in terms of the support and mission of, and the work we try to do, that's maybe for us. But similarly, we started focusing on things that we never had the time for. So we focused on, for example, building up our mailing list, which are things that for our team is really important, but always, come second. And then developing loads of activities and content for families and kids. Which again was something we really wanted to do, but never really had the time to do before. So we released a lot of online content and city trails for kids to be able to download, print at home, and go through games and activities from their home, but also discover Edinburgh, Glasgow, and homelessness in these cities in a fun, engaging way. And those were really successful because you had, again, guests kind of buying into that, but also people who were desperate for things to do. So we had a little under 2,000 downloads of them, and that generated some donations on the back of it. But what it's actually meant is that now we're releasing a subscription box around traveling around the world from the comfort of your home. So that's one step further, I feel, from these trails. Working on the product and developing that, we have now diversified some of our income by offering something that we can sell throughout the year to our supporters, but also people who could have come on our tours but were not able to do. So actually we're launching this week, a subscription box called Invisible Cities World Tour, and each box is a different country. So of course the first country is Scotland, where you basically get games, activity books, kind of gifts, stickers and audio stories that you receive at home and can do in your living room with your kids, and for them to discover a different country each time. And again, that was done in collaboration with another social enterprise, and all of that. So, and that's how I'll finish, and I hope I haven't gone over much time, but is, you know, of course it's been an incredibly hard time, but it's also been a time for us to focus on being more creative, being more collaborative, tuning in with friends like Jonny, you know, and saying, how are you doing? And then I'm doing, like, you know, such and such. But also with funders and with people that we work with. And I really feel that they know us better now, because they know the struggles we've been through, and we've been honest with them. And I think that's made us really stronger for the future. So not all is doom and gloom.
Thank you, Zakia. I think given you're able to finish on a note that says not all is doom and gloom, when actually you talk about pretty much losing your income almost overnight, I think is quite phenomenal in terms of showing some of that personal resilience. And I guess we know it's been a tough journey, but yeah, amazing. And I think looking at some of the ways you've looked at diversification, really interesting. And I've got a few questions I might come to at the end about that. You've obviously mentioned Jonny quite a lot, which is great because that was a brilliant lead in. And we, again, partnership, something that we've heard quite a lot of through this in terms of organisations really working with other people that they're perhaps not they knew of before but hadn't worked together with. So I guess you've almost introduced Jonny to some degree and some of the work at the Grass Market, but I'm going to hand over to Jonny now to talk us through kind of how he's found the last period and looking at funding and finance at the Grass Market.
Thanks, Naomi. So yeah, good afternoon everyone. And yeah, it's really interesting, that word journey that Zakia mentioned. Because if I think of, if you've invited me to speak today on the subject like this maybe 2 or 3 months ago, it would have been very different from today, in the sense that a lot of the challenges that we were facing 5 months ago have changed. They changed again a couple of months later when we were in the kind of more stable period of lockdown, and we adapted to a lot of our services and support, the way we did things, and we had a bit of some quick wins in terms of some funding and stuff. And then it's changed again, as we're now 2 weeks ago we opened our centre for the first time to our members and started doing a lot more face-to-face, albeit at a social distance, with all the health and safety regime that we've got in place. And we also got our first events booking in 2 weeks' time with an organisation that's going to, a smaller group's going to gather in our centre. So it has been a journey, and at each step of that journey have been new challenges, and a lot of adaptation has occurred both within our staff team and our organisation and our customers, and most importantly, our members. We call the people that come to our project and part of our community members. So people that benefit from our services and support and members of our community. For those who don't know the Grass Market Community Project, and looking at the participant list, I'm aware that quite a few of you do. But briefly, we are a medium-sized charity, 10 years old this year, which was a challenge, celebrating our 10th birthday in lockdown. And we support vulnerable adults. And this is where the Zakia link begins, or supporting people who are homeless, who've got experiences of homelessness, rough sleeping, people who are vulnerable in terms of their mental health, physical health, all kinds of things. And we've been doing that, has to be said, very successfully for the last 10 years. And a key part of that success has been that we are big on social enterprise. So we get over 70%, or we did previously get over 70% of our income from our social enterprises, which are in the worst industries to be in right now, because they are in events and catering. That's our biggest. We operate over 4 different sites, and many of you will know our centre does events for, in fact, many of you come in as customers and delegates in our events service and venue. And we also have, again, another close link to Zakia and her team with our cafe, and over 90% of our customers are tourists because of where we are in the Old Dam, but also because of some fabulous partnerships that we've built over the years with walking tour companies and stuff. So, and that is also the link that we have with Chris and Resilience Scotland, because we were very busy up until March this year. We're exceptionally busy in the venue itself. So the loan that we secured, the loan/grant that we secured from Resilience Scotland, was and still will hopefully afford us some expansion of our premises to both continue expanding our social outcomes and working with more and more vulnerable people in different ways, but also critically sustain and grow that social enterprise income. Because to put it in perspective, we've lost the best part of £500,000 over the last 6 months. And even with all the things that I'm going to mention very briefly in terms of funding and partnerships and stuff like that we've quickly got into, we've still only managed to secure about £100,000 of that. So we've made effectively a £400,000 loss. And even if you take into account the furloughing scheme, which has benefited another £100,000, that's £300,000 that we've lost over the last 5 months. The impact has been huge on us. Most worryingly, we're an organisation that's all about relationships. It takes an incredibly long time to build up relationships with people that have had very negative experiences, that lack trust, that have been moved from agency to agency, from service to service. And we pride ourselves on having one of the lowest staff turnovers and employing the best people when it comes to values and commitment to our members. And then one of the saddest things is we've lost key staff. We've had to make staff redundant, and that's been unavoidable. Even with staff retention schemes, it's just not been enough to keep people in and keep people in place. And we may well see more to come. So that's been a devastating impact. It is not all. So we've managed to retain 26 of our 33 staff, but that's enough for us to really have felt that. And the SMT and myself felt it big time, because we've had to make decisions about where our priorities are, and that's been very difficult. We have been totally blown away by the very flexible and positive response that we got from our existing funders. So that really helped us in those early stages. So stage one for us was getting very much into practical support. We do a lot around food, and we feed people who, without our food, probably wouldn't eat. So we were providing food to about 70 people a week, 3 times a week, 2 meals a day. And we did that using volunteers. Initially, our team shrunk right down because we kind of thought, let's go for the furlough scheme big time to sustain our organisation. And then we gradually unfurloughed people because we needed them to provide that practical support. So we switched very much into that practical support. As Zakia alluded to earlier on, we tried to get everyone connected where they weren't connected. That was a huge challenge. Again, the nature of our client group is they're probably the most digitally excluded client group there is. Many of them don't have devices, many of them share devices, many of them, if they do have devices, don't have connectivity, so that was a big challenge. So we accessed funding for broadband connection, mobile phones, worked in partnership with Remakery and other organizations to give out free laptops. But even then, you then had to try and literally kind of help people get connected once they had the device. So we have to do quite a bit of not physical hand holding, but being present maybe through a window, literally on the other side of their wall, just describing what to do to get connected. We also purchased some apps so that we could get control of their devices and stuff like that, so that we could help get them connected. So that was where we were in stage one. We did put a crowdfunder. I agree wholeheartedly with what Zakia said. I've had very mixed experiences of crowdfunding. It worked to an extent, and it generated a small amount of money, which was ours, and we could put it where we needed to. But it didn't get anywhere near what we thought we would get from it. And I think part of that was to do with the level of competition. There's a lot of crowdfunding campaigns launched at the same time, understandably, across the whole sector. Everyone was keen to support their own organizations and services, and we were among many. But what it did do, though, is it generated an interest in volunteering. So it was a very useful tool. We did get a lot of practical donations from the co-op, from Waitrose, people that heard about us. So it was like a tool, if you like, to get out there on social media and say, we're looking for help, we're looking for help, highlighting the meal delivery service. Because all our meals are delivered by volunteers in their own cars. And that was great to get those practical things in place and to get that huge impetus of volunteering. Because all these people that were furloughed were, well, not all, but many were looking for experiences and to keep themselves busy and get active and to support their communities. So we were delighted. We've had really good results with expanding our volunteer program. One of the things we did was virtual walking, and that was delivered by volunteers. And what that involved was phoning one of our members and meeting up with them, but not physically, just meeting up somewhere else in the city, different places, and chatting on the phone and going for a walk. So it met that need to get physical exercise and help people get out of the house, but also people were getting that kind of befriending service and that emotional support. Really helped at the time that our existing funders were flexible. And by that, I mean, like, we were just overwhelmed. I was getting phone calls all the time and emails saying, how can we help? You know, whatever you had the money for before, maybe you need it for something else. We definitely experienced that with people like the Robertson Trust, Bank of Scotland, the Awards for All. They came to us and said, what do you need it for? What will help you right now? At the beginning, that was a godsend to have that freedom and flexibility to say, right, okay, you know, you had it for this staff, or they're being furloughed, can we use it for this or whatever? And it was really helpful. We had mixed experiences, Scottish Government funding, and it's not a criticism wholesale, because I know other organisations did very well out of Scottish Government. We did it in some funds, others less so. Some funds asked for a huge amount of work and then we were unsuccessful, and that was quite frustrating. They asked us to answer questions like 3-year financial forecasting, which is very hard in the middle of a financial crisis. Others were very quick, such as the Wellbeing Fund, and they turned that around very quickly, and we're really grateful to that. That would, for me, be the biggest lesson that I'd like to, Dougie and his colleagues to, and I'm sure that you've heard this from many people, is if we can sustain some of that rethinking about timescales, about quickness of decision making, it would be much appreciated, because that was hugely helpful, and that was often, if you've been around in the third sector as long as I have, it's often the criticism in the past of, you know, really long timescales making decisions. So that was really helpful, that decisions were being made quicker. And I got a sense, because I built up a relationship with people like the Lottery team, that things are being more devolved to within grant funding officers and teams, and they were able to make decisions about smaller pots of money more quickly and source funding for us and stuff. And that was really helpful, that it wasn't, like I say, a prolonged process where you're getting passed around lots of different people. So we've got a better relationship than ever with our funders, and I'm really grateful to them. We're really grateful to them. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them bending over backwards to make things happen. And I hope that is sustained going forward. In terms of adaptation, the key thing for the staff that were carried on and weren't furloughed, delivering these services and support, they had to make a shift, because we moved from being 70%, as I said earlier, social enterprise funded, to being 100% grant funded and donations funded. There was considerably more reporting involved, which is absolutely fine. We understand that. But some of my team come from very commercial background, and they're not used to that. When you're serving someone a cup of coffee or a lunch in a canteen in the St. James Centre, you don't tend to have to capture the outcomes and the benefit and all that sort of stuff. You know, they get their product and they pay a commercial price, and that's it. So we very quickly engaged with Just Enterprise, which was really helpful, and the Social Value Lab have been really good there, and designing and systems that are much easier to gather information about, so we can record impact and stuff much more effectively, so we can report to our funders. We've also got a beginnings of a good partnership with the tech army to bring in some tech solutions about some of that stuff, get staff using more apps, more weekly report writing that they can do very quickly, and that's been really, really positive. We've supported where we can other organisations such as Invisible Cities and the Intersci and choirs and people that use our space where we can, both financially and in terms of volunteer support and Zoom and tech support. That's been really important, because they provide a lot of our services and support to our members. So it's really important that we do give as much as we can to them. The big thing for me in terms of the adaptation is we're now in this most recent stage. Like I say, we opened 2 weeks ago, and we're starting to look at events and stuff, and there's lots of costs involved. It's a lot more difficult to raise money when you have less people sitting down having a meal, or less people using an event space. So we invested quite a lot in both financially and in terms of our time in redesigning our events. We've invested in higher quality broadband connections and cabling and cameras, so that people can broadcast their meetings and stream online, that kind of thing. That's been quite a big hit, but we think it's worth it, and we're trying to future-proof. We're trying to be prepared for what will emerge after the pandemic, which will be very different kinds of events. And we've also re-looked at how we work in terms of our staff team and increased the level at which people work from home, that kind of thing. Before we had to, because we're in lockdown. Now we're looking at what will actually support them as a member of staff and support our organisation going forward, which has led to a redesign around our space. And we'll be talking to people like Resilience Scotland and the funders of our extension, because we're currently redesigning and rethinking that space because it won't necessarily have to meet the same outcomes as it did. It might have to meet some new ones. And so we're working on that at the moment. Quite a few things like that have been positive. For example, speeding up our upgrading of our internet and getting our members connected through laptops and getting more courses and programs online has been really positive. And now we're blown away by the fact that some of our members who didn't attend our activities and support before COVID are now connecting because they can from their home. Some people where actually going online is hugely beneficial to them because they're not having to make long bus journeys for a 2-hour class, or they're not having to come out of their house if they're suffering from anxiety, which many people do. They can actually go online and be part of the group. So now we've moved into this sort of hybrid system where you can be in the room, be at the activity, but you can also participate using audio, visual and streaming and stuff. And that's been a really welcome benefit from rethinking all that sort of stuff. And that probably wouldn't have happened, to be honest, if it hadn't been for COVID, that sped us on to start thinking about how we can connect to people more who are very isolated, that aren't even coming out of their house. So that I welcome. And I am genuinely really heartened by the level of support that we've had from people and the offers of help across all our partners and our funders. And like I say, we wouldn't be here, we wouldn't exist if it wasn't for them. So I think I'll end on that positive note.
Thank you, Jonny. Interesting again, I'm picking up, it's certainly not been without its challenges, and having been on that side of having to lose members of staff in previous organisations I've worked for, it's a tough journey, and I think that decision making can be really hard at times. And I'm listening in, and actually what I heard come through quite strongly from both yourself and Zakia was something around decision making and looking and assessing a situation, and actually not necessarily sitting there waiting for everyone to rush and help you, even though they did. But actually, I'm fascinated to hear that you're investing in your organisation and spending money to almost look at what comes next as well. And I think there'll be a lot of organisations that perhaps are nervous about doing that, but actually it shows decisiveness and just seeing how that will help an organisation push forwards. I wanted to pick up perhaps I'm conscious we've got an extra 10 minutes. I know people said they could stay till 22, and there's a few questions come in, and this is perhaps a general one back to Dougie and Chris. So, and I think Zakia and Jonny both picked up on it really, about that thing of trust seems to have really changed in funder relationships in terms of and it's come through in the questions in terms of the approaches that existing funders have taken with the people that they support, and almost saying we trust you to do the right thing for your community. Do you think some of those changed perceptions will change some of the ways that funding sets its systems out moving forwards? And I'll perhaps come to Dougie first.
I suppose quite likely. Over the last couple of years, we have been working on a kind of an area-based model rather than a program-based model. Funding officers, managers have been out and about, meeting with groups, establishing relationships. I think that really paid dividends when March kicked in and COVID appeared on these shores. And I think that's a way of working that we're not going to be likely to be changing. In terms of decision making, speed and all the rest of it, these are all lessons that we're trying to take on board as much as we can at the moment. It's challenging for everyone on every level. Obviously we have public funds, and there are certain basics that we need to get right, and processes that we need to follow to keep our friends in audit happy. But no, I think the response has been pretty strong, and I think the relationships that we had previously have been sort of taken to the next level, as it were, and that trust to let folk get on with it is something that's likely to be continuing.
Thank you, Dougie. Chris, any perspectives from your end?
One of the good things that's happened out of the pandemic, although there's only a few, is that funders have been catching up on a regular basis, on a more formal basis, and having regular discussions. And one of the words that's being used is trust. And certainly Jonny and Zakia allude to the fact that their funders were in touch saying, we know you gave you money for X, but if you need to use it for Y, then that's absolutely fine. We also witnessed what was one of the biggest giveaways in Scottish Government history, when they gave away £320 million with little or no reporting required, which is absolutely unknown in Scottish Government terms, because you've got to account for every last penny because of where the money comes from. I'm not sure that will be repeated from Scottish Government. I think there'll be more tracking, but certainly from independent funders, trusts and foundations, I think there'll be a greater level of trust where organisations are trusted to deliver outcomes, and maybe reporting will become less onerous because people will be trusted to deliver rather than report. But I certainly think it's the direction of travel. I know London funders have been doing a lot of work on it, and Scottish funders have been talking to them to see where they're going at the moment with that. But I back Dougie. I think that's the way to go. But for statutory funders, I think the big giveaway might come to an end fairly abruptly.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been unprecedented, I guess, the approach and the funds that have come in. And I am going to come back to things like the Third Sector Resilience Fund at the end, because there's important key information we should probably get out about that today as well. But before, obviously, we end up losing some of our guest speakers, there's a couple of particular questions that have come in. One is a particular one for you, Chris, that's just come in. Is it right that at the moment the Resilience Scotland money at the present time is for organisations that you have existing relationships with, and it's closed for new applications? Can you just clarify?
That's correct. We have no new funding opportunities at the moment, unless you're an existing investee, but we'd hope to reopen to all others after January.
Thank you. But there are options through Foundation Scotland that you talked about.
Yes.
Resilience Scotland. Just making sure everyone's clear on some of those key messages. There's a few people perhaps just asking, and it's a specific one maybe to you, Dougie, about people that are looking at community asset transfer but are looking at perhaps ways they could do work on a building in advance. Are there funds around that they can access to help them do that? My bit of advice is always to contact the Community Ownership Support Service, who are brilliant, run through DTAS, as a great source of advice around that.
And the short answer from our point of view is to speak to the area team and have a further chat about your project. The major capital programme, which was community assets, which was the kind of successor to growing community assets, that closed. So we don't have a significant capital programme open at the present time. Capital is available to a certain extent, limited through community-led. It's capped at £50,000 towards capital improvements that enable the delivery of the revenue activities, and there's a small amount obviously through National Lottery Awards for All, so it depends on scale and everything. So the short answer is speak to the area team.
Thank you, Dougie. That's certainly helpful in terms of specific questions. If you've got any last ones, just really put them in the chat. I know some of our presenters have been answering questions directly as they've come in as well, so we can do that. I guess I wanted to put a little note. I think you talked about the Third Sector Resilience Fund, and I guess the important thing that's come out today, or came out yesterday, is that actually will close for applications at 12 o'clock on Friday. So if you were looking at the Third Sector Resilience Fund, that's closing for applications at 12 o'clock noon. So we've kind of shared that, and it's important to perhaps know that if you're looking at it. You will have also picked up, and a few things obviously got announced when the programme for government came out, and also when the government launched its economic recovery programme. So those of you that follow any of that news will know that there is a recovery programme that's due to get launched. So the recovery programme will replace the Third Sector Resilience Fund, and we're anticipating that news on the recovery programme, because it's looking at much more than just finance and funding, but looking at a support structure that sits around that. We're expecting news on that next week, which is why we have a webinar booked in for Monday. So we're hopeful we might be able to try and tell you a bit more about what that includes on Monday, or at least let you know the dates to look out for and when that's coming. So it's happening in the background in terms of the prep, but the official launch and opening isn't yet. But you can join us on Monday, and we'll try and tell you as much as we are able to, and that is known at that point about that. But it's definitely part of a full programme, not just the funding and finance package. But if you're looking at the Resilience Fund, it closes at 12 o'clock at noon. I just want to come just on a question really to Jonny and Zakia, and it's perhaps the last one I was going to ask if no more questions come in today, and it was about that. It's about decision making and how you've obviously spoken about how you've adapted quite well, and you've had to yourselves make some quite quick decisions. Have you got any advice for organisations out there in terms of how you've approached quite fast decision making in quite turbulent times, both through your senior management team and through your board of directors? And I'll perhaps come to Jonny and then Zakia.
Sure, yeah, so the first thing that I'd say in terms of advice is make sure you look after yourself as a leader and as a decision maker. It's absolutely vital. I've been, like Zakia mentioned it earlier on, really other CEOs and people in different organizations. That's really, really important. You're not alone, and it's really important that you reach out. That's vital. Then I'm really lucky at the Grass Market Community Project. We are still a relatively small organisation, and the SMT is a relatively small team, and we very much like a family. We've been around together and working together for the best part of 6 years. I'm losing someone for very positive reasons. At the end of this week, he's moving to Spain. But that said, we're really close. So again, we support one another and just make sure we're giving each other plenty of time. Get the information, reach out to as many different people as you have time to do. Speak to your board, make sure that they are fully informed, and that that hopefully, again, I'm very lucky, I have a good relationship with my board, that you can talk to them if you need additional support for yourself or a member of your team, that they respond. And also that they recognize you can only make decisions on what you have in front of you. So one of the first things we did in terms of financial decision making is we micromanaged the finances a bit more than we normally would, literally week to week with a small team, including a board member, because we were making difficult decisions that had big impact. And we made sure that we had the full backing of the board so we could make decisions quickly. That meant that a board member came to these finance meetings every week. Myself, the finance officer, and one of the SMT and a board member met every week, looked at the figures on a week-to-week basis, and just kept making sure that we were going to be okay. And if anything came in, obviously, we would reflect that. That's got better as we become a bit more stable. But initially, that's what we did. So it was about having the right people around the table so you can make decisions quickly, but you're not going to worry about them afterwards. You're going to make sure that all the different parts of the organization have got your back. I am really lucky, again, just to go back to this, I do have a staff team where all of us took a pay cut effectively, or we reduced our hours in the short term to help save our organization. That wasn't an easy decision to make, and no one was put under pressure, but everyone decided as a whole organization that that was the right thing to do. So we did that, and it helped us in the very, very short term.
It's interesting, actually, you say that. I was speaking to someone the other day that had taken the decision to cut their hours as a leader, and kind of was then starting to feel guilty that they weren't almost working 60 hours a week, but they were saying, actually, we're the most expensive and we've tried to cut our hours and maintain our energy for the long haul rather than...
That was it, yeah. It's about making it sustainable.
And I think every organisation is going to be different in that regard, but I think, you know, we have to enable and be confident that we know the leaders of our social enterprises are making the right decisions for their organisation and for themselves. It's really...
It has to be said, though, one of the things that I really appreciated was people like Duncan and people ringing me and saying, anything you want to get off your chest, you want to just rant and just vent. And I'm really lucky that he wasn't one of a number of people that gave me that opportunity. And some people, I took that up and just had a good kind of rant about what was going on. And that was in the first few weeks and months, but it really helped having all these different organisations and people out there, people you had good relationships with anyway, just supporting you. It's really important.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jonny. Zakia, anything quickly from you? I know a couple of our panellists have to literally leave at 22, so...
Yeah, I think looking after yourself is such an important and yet difficult one, because when everybody is going through a hard time, you may be going through a hard time, and that's hard to kind of translate. I think for me, the biggest lesson I learned with Invisible Cities, but also my time at the Homeless World Cup, Naomi, for example, too, is honesty. And I think sometimes, I think it all comes part of the same package, is being able to say, not everything is shit, pardon my French, everything is really bad, we don't know how to cope, whether that's with your team or with, supporters or friends or people, and then with the funders as well, to say, actually, I don't know what be doing just now. And with the board, a lot of people, I was really humbled and happy and surprised that people will come in and do this work with you to say, okay, let's regroup, think about it, think about the plan. I can be as a person or as a leader quite creative. I'll come up with the crazy ideas, but then the strategy and the planning is something that I really have to push myself to do. So sometimes I need support with that, and never underestimate, I've realized how resilient and how strong and amazing my team was, because half of the team at Invisible Cities is based in Manchester. So that's really hard for us to work together remotely anyway. But actually, we've never felt so close to each other, because we were looking out after each other. I received lovely care packages, and these things are anecdotal, but they really matter. And actually, being able to have an honest picture, even with team, with the folk that we support as well, to say, actually, no, I haven't had the time to do X, Y, Z, and with the funders as well. But honesty and building on that relationship and looking after yourself too and your team. I think at the end of the day, people are just going through. It really helped me define what kind of support we would provide to everybody as well, because I realized I was struggling through lockdown with mental health, with boredom, with activities, with all of that. But and it made me think, what would happen if you had prior issues with anxiety, with depression, with addiction, and how can we support people better, putting all our experiences together. And so I think those are all the lessons and things I already knew, but for sure 1,000 times got highlighted during this period.
No, thank you, Zakia. I think we've all found ourselves perhaps feeling more vulnerable at times, but actually felt like we've been able to express that better than we've ever been able to say before. And I think sometimes as leaders of organisations, you feel like you're not allowed to show that vulnerability. You always have to show strength. And I think it can be really important to bring people with you if sometimes you are able to show that. We've literally got a minute left, and I'm just going to ask Dougie and Chris, if there's one quick tip for organisations out there looking for funding, what's the thing that often holds applications back, makes them take longer? What's the bit of information people often forget to put in that's really critical? Just that one last quick top tip.
From my point of view, it comes from what everyone else has been saying about the kind of trust and honesty. Just speak to us. There is a form that's there to catch a lot of information, but it's not going to catch everything. Some of that is going to come in the form of dialogue and chat, so just be upfront.
Thank you, Dougie, really helpful. And Chris, a last just a bit of advice from you.
I think I'll give two pieces. One, if you're applying for a loan for us going forward, make sure you've got all your financials in place, because that's the biggest barrier that people don't pay attention. But at a time when there's so many people requiring help, just apply for what you need, not just what you want.
Thank you. I think we're all trying to spread a lot of money, or a little bit of money. It sounds like a lot, but spread across all of the organisations that need it right now. I think that's a really helpful advice to think about our sector as a whole, not just individual organisations. I guess I was only going to add, the other bit I always add is make sure you read the FAQs. Don't waste your time applying for something that, had you really read the FAQs properly, you'd realise it was a waste of time applying in the first place. So always read the FAQs is the last bit I was going to add as well. I just want to thank all of our panellists for today. We're already getting some great feedback. I know we've run slightly over, but it's been a great session. I actually have come away feeling really inspired by social enterprise activity again. Having run a number of these, I think the fact that you came out with such positive statements and have really shown diversity at what I know has been a really, really hard time is incredible to read, and I know will have inspired a lot of people on the session. So thank you to everyone for joining us today, to Dougie, to Chris, to Jonny and to Zakia. And if you do want to know more about the recovery programme, we are doing another session on Monday, and we'll try and hopefully we'll be able to say stuff at that. If we get to a point where we're not publicly able to say anything at that, we'll just keep telling you when the next session's going to be. So we're trying to make sure that you're really up to date as soon as you can. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
Take care, folks.
Thank you. Bye.